Hello, survivors. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, if you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Also, tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. It's great to see how far our community reaches. Now, let's start the story. The coffee tasted like burnt cardboard, same as every Tuesday morning shift start. 6:58 a.m. blinked on the monitor in the security office, 2 minutes before my official clock-in, but I always came early. Gave me time to catch up on the overnight logs, see what minor dramas unfolded while Northwood University slept. Mostly noise complaints from dorms, maybe a suspicious car reported near the faculty parking lot. Standard stuff. My name's Alex, and for the past 18 months being a campus security guard was my life. Paid the bills, decent benefits, and kept me busy while I figured out what came next after my short stint in the Army Reserves fizzled out. Better than stacking shelves anyway. Maria, my shift partner, was already there, scrolling through her phone. She'd been doing this 5 years longer than me, had that seen-it-all weariness guards get, but she was solid, reliable. "Morning, Alex," she mumbled without looking up. "Overnight was dead, literally. Think Henderson actually fell asleep on patrol again." "Wouldn't surprise me," I said, grabbing the duty log. "Anything interesting on the news?" Usually Maria had the local gossip or some bizarre national story to share. She frowned, finally looking up from her phone. "Weird stuff. Some kind of flu hitting hard back east. Boston's reporting major hospital surges, talking quarantine zones." "Flu season came early," I shrugged, scanning the log. Nothing but the usual. Unlocked door at the chem building. Group dispersed from the quad after midnight. "This sounds different," Maria insisted, holding up her phone. "Look at this feed from Philly. Riot police deployed." Before I could look, the main security line rang, the direct line from campus dispatch. Maria answered, her expression shifting from casual interest to concern. "Say again? Which dorm? Okay. Sending a unit now." She hung up, grabbing her radio. "Alex, let's roll. Disturbance call, Thompson Hall, 3rd floor. Multiple reports of screaming. Sounds like a serious fight." We signed out our radios and keys, the routine motions suddenly feeling charged with an unfamiliar tension. As we headed for the patrol cart, basically a glorified golf cart with flashing lights, I noticed more campus maintenance vehicles than usual speeding past, their drivers looking pale. The air felt heavy too. Not just with the usual early autumn dampness of coastal Washington, but with something else, an electric hum of wrongness. "Probably just midterm stress getting out of hand," I said, trying to rationalize the feeling away. "Maybe," Maria replied, her eyes scanning the slowly awakening campus. Fewer students were out than usual for 7:15 a.m. Those we did see walked quickly, heads down, some talking urgently into phones that seemed to be having trouble connecting. Thompson Hall was one of the older dorms, brick and ivy, usually quiet. But as we pulled up, the quiet felt wrong. The main entrance door was propped open with a fire extinguisher, a violation of protocol. No students milled around outside. No resident advisor waited to meet us. "Stay sharp," Maria murmured, unclipping her heavy-duty flashlight, more baton than light source. Campus policy meant no firearms for regular patrols, just the flashlight. Pepper spray and cuffs. We were security, not police. A line constantly blurred in panicked moments. We entered the lobby. Empty. A backpack lay abandoned near the mailboxes, its contents spilled across the floor. Textbooks, notebooks, an uneaten apple. Faint scuffling sounds drifted down from upstairs. We took the stairs 2 at a time, radios quiet for now. The second-floor landing was also empty, but the wrongness intensified. A faint coppery smell hung in the air, masked slightly by the scent of stale pizza and dorm room laundry. The screaming started again as we reached the 3rd-floor landing. Not anger, not pain, but pure, raw terror followed by a crash that sounded like furniture splintering. We drew our flashlights, beams cutting through the dim hallway. Room 314. The door was slightly ajar, cracked near the hinges. Campus security. Maria announced, kicking the door open the rest of the way. The scene inside stopped me cold. The room was wrecked. 2 figures were on the floor, locked in a struggle. One, a young man in a Northwood U sweatshirt, was desperately trying to push away the other, a girl, maybe his roommate or girlfriend. But she wasn't just fighting him. She was biting him, tearing at his neck with her teeth like an animal. Blood was everywhere, sprayed across the walls, soaking into the cheap carpet. Her eyes, when they flickered towards our lights, were milky white with pinpoint red pupils utterly devoid of recognition. Her skin had a gray, almost translucent quality. "Get off him," I shouted, moving forward on instinct. The girl hissed, a wet gurgling sound, and turned towards us with impossible speed. She launched herself from the floor, ignoring the young man now sobbing beneath her. Maria reacted faster, swinging her flashlight in a heavy arc that connected with the side of the girl's head. The impact would have dropped a normal person, but she barely flinched, just snarled and swiped at Maria with claw-like hands. I tackled her, driving her back against the wall. She felt wrong, unnaturally strong, skin cold despite the obvious exertion. She bit at my arm, teeth snapping inches from my face. I slammed my forearm against her throat, pinning her. Her white eyes rolled, fixated on me with pure, mindless aggression. "Check him!" I yelled at Maria, struggling to hold the thrashing girl. Maria knelt beside the young man on the floor. His neck was a mess. "He's losing too much blood. Radio. For EMS." As Maria reached for her radio, the girl I was holding suddenly went limp, her body spasming violently. A low moan escaped her lips, then silence. Her eyes rolled back in her head. "Is she?" Maria started. Before she could finish, the girl's eyes snapped open again, now completely red. She surged upward with renewed strength, throwing me off balance. She scrambled towards Maria, ignoring me completely, driven by some horrific instinct. "Maria, look out!" Maria turned just as the girl lunged, sinking her teeth into Maria's outstretched arm. Maria screamed, a sound of shock and agony, and stumbled back, trying to shake the attacker off. I raised my flashlight, aiming for the head, but the young man on the floor, the initial victim, suddenly sat up. His eyes were the same milky white, the same pinpoint red pupils. He let out a guttural roar and scrambled towards my legs. 2. Them. My mind struggled to process the impossible reality. This wasn't a fight. It was something else. Something ripped from the pages of a nightmare. I kicked the young man back, brought the heavy flashlight down hard on the girl's head as she clung to Maria's arm. Bone crunched. She collapsed. Finally. Still. But the young man was already getting up again, seemingly unfazed by the kick that should have broken ribs. Headshot. The thought screamed through my mind, though I didn't know where it came from. Aim for the head. I swung the flashlight like a bat, connecting squarely with his temple. He dropped like a stone, skull audibly cracking. Silence descended, broken only by Maria's ragged breathing and the distant growing chorus of sirens outside. Maria stared down at the bite on her arm, blood welling up around the ragged teeth marks. Her face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What the hell is happening?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that our shift had just gone from routine to unimaginable, and the sun hadn't even fully cleared the horizon. This was only the beginning. We barricaded the door to room 314 using a heavy dresser dragged from the hallway, ignoring the spreading pool of blood seeping underneath. Maria was leaning against the wall, pressing a wad of gauze from her pocket. First aid kit against the bite. It wasn't deep, but the skin was broken. According to whatever nightmare logic was unfolding, that was enough. "We need to report this," she said, her voice tight. "Protocol." "Forget protocol," I snapped, checking the hallway through the peephole. More shuffling sounds were coming from further down the hall. "Did you hear dispatch? Hospital's overrun, comms breaking down. Whatever this is, it's spreading. Faster than anyone can handle." Her radio crackled. Unit 417, what's your status? We have multiple calls from Thompson Hall, reports of screaming on floors 2 and 4. Maria looked at me, then keyed the mic. Dispatch, this is 417. We have multiple aggressive individuals down. Requesting immediate backup and hazmat protocols. Officer-involved injury. Potential biohazard exposure. All units are engaged, 417. The dispatcher's voice was strained. We have reports campus-wide. Science building, library, student union, it's everywhere. Campus lockdown initiated 5 minutes ago, shelter in place. Campus-wide. The words hung in the air. This wasn't isolated. Maria slid down the wall, her face ashen. How long? She asked, looking at the bite again. We don't know, I said, though the girl in the room had turned almost instantly after dying. But we can't stay here. My mind raced through campus layouts, security protocols, evacuation routes I'd memorized, but never expected to use. The security office was on the opposite side of campus, too far. The campus police substation was closer, maybe more defensible, but likely already engaged. The tunnels, I said suddenly. The old service tunnels, under the main quad. They connect most of the older buildings, including the admin building. Less likely to be filled with them. Maria nodded slowly. Admin building has the central security hub, monitoring stations, backup comms, maybe even some weapons in the emergency locker. It was a long shot, but better than staying put. We checked the hallway again. Clear for now. Move fast. Stay quiet, I whispered. We descended the stairs, flashlights off, using the emergency lighting that flickered intermittently. The second floor was worse than the third. Doors hung open, rooms ransacked. We saw more bodies, some still, some twitching with that unnatural animation. We avoided them, sticking to the shadows. The smell was getting stronger, thick and cloying. The first-floor lobby was no longer empty. Half a dozen infected milled around, drawn by the earlier commotion or maybe just sensing our presence. They hadn't seen us yet. Their heads snapped around at the slightest sound, eyes scanning blindly. Back stairwell, Maria breathed, pointing towards a service exit usually used by maintenance staff. It led outside, closer to the tunnel entrance near the old clock tower. We slipped through the stairwell door just as one of the infected in the lobby let out a piercing shriek, noticing movement. We didn't look back, bursting out into the morning air. The campus quad, usually bustling with students heading to 8 a.m. classes, was a scene of carnage. Bodies lay scattered across the manicured lawn. A few infected chased terrified students who screamed as they ran. Sirens wailed from the city beyond the campus gates, a constant rising background noise. Tunnel entrance 50 yards, I pointed, keeping my voice low. Stay behind the hedges. We moved in a crouch, using shrubbery and parked bicycles for a cover. Maria was favoring her bitten arm, her breathing growing shallow. We were halfway there when a lone figure stumbled out from behind the statue of the university founder. It was a student, young, clutching a bleeding wound on his leg, eyes wide with terror. "Help me," he cried out, spotting us. The sound immediately drew the attention of 3 nearby infected. They changed direction, moving toward the student with that relentless, jerky gait. "Damn it," Maria cursed. "We can't just leave him." We engage. We draw the rest, I argued, pulling her toward the tunnel entrance. We stick to the plan. He won't make it. She was right, the infected were closing in. I made a split-second decision. Get to the tunnel, lock it from the inside if you can. I'll create a diversion. Alex, no. Go, I shoved her toward the low stone wall surrounding the tunnel access hatch. While she scrambled over it, I stepped out from behind the hedges, shouting, "Hey! Over here!" The 3 infected immediately turned towards me. Good. The injured student saw his chance and limped away in the opposite direction. More infected were now moving towards my voice from across the quad. This was stupid. This was against every survival instinct, but leaving that kid felt worse. I backed towards the clock tower, keeping the infected focused on me. My flashlight was useless as a weapon against this many. Pepper spray? A joke. I needed distance. A choke point. The clock tower entrance. Heavy oak doors, narrow archway. I sprinted for it, the fastest infected surprisingly quick on my heels. I reached the doors, yanked one open, slipped inside and slammed it shut, just as the first body hit it from the outside. The heavy wood shuddered. I fumbled with the bolt, sliding it home. More impacts. They were piling up against the door, moaning and scratching. Safe, for a moment. I leaned against the door, catching my breath, listening to the cacophony outside. Then I remembered Maria. Had she made it? Was she waiting in the tunnel? I had to get to her. The clock tower had another exit, a service door leading directly to the tunnel access area. I navigated through the tower's dusty ground floor, past ropes and weights for the ancient clock mechanism. The service door was unlocked. Peeking out, I saw the tunnel hatch was closed. Relief washed over me. You'd made it. I slipped out, crossed the few yards to the hatch, and lifted the heavy iron lid. Maria, I called down into the darkness. Silence. Maria, it's Alex. I'm coming down. Still nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I swung my legs over the edge and started down the rusty ladder, flashlight beam cutting through the subterranean gloom. The air was damp, smelling of earth and decay. I reached the bottom and swept my light around the small junction chamber. Empty. But the tunnel leading towards the administration building stood open, and on the damp concrete floor, glinting in my flashlight beam, lay Maria's radio and her heavy-duty flashlight. Dropped. Not placed. Signs of a struggle? Or had she turned? The thought made me physically sick. How fast did it work after a bite? Minutes? Less? Had she locked herself further down the tunnel to protect me, or was something else down there with her? Footsteps echoed from the, tunnel entrance behind me. More infected had found the hatch. I couldn't go back up. Steeling myself, I picked up Maria's flashlight, now my only real weapon, and plunged into the darkness of the tunnel leading towards the admin building, calling her name softly, dreading the answer I might receive. The service tunnel was colder than the air outside, the silence broken only by the dripping of unseen water and the distant echo of the chaos above ground. My flashlight beam bounced off damp brick walls lined with thick bundles of pipes and wires. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Maria, I called again, louder this time. My voice echoed unnervingly. A shuffling sound answered from deeper. Within the tunnel. My grip tightened on the heavy flashlight. I moved forward cautiously, sweeping the beam from side to side. The tunnel branched ahead. Left led towards the science complex, right towards the administration building. Maria's dropped items suggested she'd gone right. I took the right fork. The shuffling grew louder, accompanied by a low, wet gurgle. Rounding a bend, my light fell on a figure slumped against the wall. Maria. She looked up as my light hit. Her, and my breath caught. Her skin had taken on that same horrifying gray pallor I'd seen in the dorm room. Her eyes cloudy and vacant except for those needle-prick red pupils fixed on me. The bite on her arm looked inflamed, veins darkening around the wound. She tried to speak, but only that gurgling sound came out. Maria, I whispered, heartbroken. It had been maybe 15 minutes since the bite. It worked horrifyingly fast. She pushed herself away from the wall, stumbling towards me. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated, but undeniably aggressive. The transformation was complete. Whatever had been Maria was gone, replaced by this thing, driven by the same mindless hunger. This was the moment Mike had warned me about. In the patrol car, the moment I hadn't been able to face then. Don't hesitate, don't let sentiment get you killed. She lunged. I sidestepped, swinging the flashlight hard against the side of her head. She stumbled but didn't fall, turning back towards me with that horrible gurgle. Tears blurred my vision, but my training took over. Aim for the head, destroy the brainstem. I swung again, putting all my weight behind it. The heavy metal connected with her temple. A sickening crunch echoed through the tunnel. She dropped, lifeless. Truly lifeless this time. I stood over her for a long moment, chest heaving, the flashlight feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. The silence pressed in. I'd just killed my partner, or what was left of her. Bile rose in my throat. I turned away, unable to look at her anymore, and forced myself to move deeper into the tunnel, towards the admin building. Grief would have to wait. Survival came first. The tunnel opened into a larger maintenance junction beneath the administration building. Multiple passages branched off, leading to different parts of the campus. I needed the one that went up, to the central security hub. Consulting the emergency map I always carried folded in my pocket, I located the correct ladder. Before climbing, I listened. Silence. The fighting sounds from above seemed more distant here. Maybe the admin building was still secure. I ascended the ladder, emerging into a basement storage area filled with old filing cabinets and forgotten office furniture. The door leading to the main basement level was locked. Standard security. Procedure. My master key clicked it open. The basement corridor was deserted, emergency lights casting long shadows. I moved cautiously towards the security office. The door was closed, but light spilled from beneath it. I could hear voices inside, hushed, tense. "Identify yourself," a voice called out as I approached. "Officer Alex Thorne, campus security," I replied, keeping my hands visible. The door opened a crack, revealing a campus police officer I recognized. Miller, a solid guy, usually worked traffic. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Thorne, we thought all security units were... Get. Here, quick!" He pulled me inside, locking the door behind me. The security hub was crowded. Miller, 2 other campus cops I didn't know well, and about 5 civilian staff members, administrators, IT techs, huddled around the main console, watching the flickering security monitors. Most screens were dead, showing static or empty. Corridors, but a few displayed scenes of chaos. Infected overwhelming barricades near the student union, bodies littering the steps of the library. "What's the situation?" I asked Miller. "Bad," he said grimly. "Campus is overrun. We lost contact with City PD about an hour ago. National Guard's trying to set up a perimeter around the city, but..." He trailed off, gesturing at the chaotic screens. "Any word on evacuation?" "Negative. Orders are to shelter in place, but this building won't hold forever. We've barricaded the main entrances, but they're already probing the weak points." He pointed to a monitor showing the building's main lobby. Several infected were pounding mindlessly on the reinforced glass doors. "Where's Chief Harris?" I asked, referring to the head of campus police. Miller's expression darkened. "Tried to reach the student union when the first calls came in. Radio went dead 20 minutes later." We were on our own. I looked around the room, assessing our resources. 3 armed police officers, maybe a dozen terrified civilians. Limited supplies visible. Not good odds. "Are the tunnels secure?" I asked. "We sealed the main access points from this end," Miller confirmed. "But who knows what's already down there." Just then, one of the civilians, a young woman from the IT department named Chloe, pointed at a monitor. "Look, loading. Dock camera!" The screen showed the building's rear loading dock. A delivery truck stood near the bay doors, its engine idling. The driver was slumped over the wheel. As we watched, his head snapped up. His eyes were white and red. "He's turned," Miller breathed, "and he's still in the damn truck." The infected driver fumbled with the controls. Then the truck lurched forward, smashing through the loading dock's roll-up door. It plowed into the basement corridor beyond, metal screeching as it tore through walls and equipment, before finally crashing to a halt maybe 50 feet from our position. The impact shook the entire building. Worse, the crash had created a breach. Infected, drawn by the noise, began pouring into the basement from the loading dock area. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. "They're in the building," Miller yelled, raising his shotgun. "Barricade this door. Now." We shoved desks, filing, cabinets, anything heavy against the security hub door. Outside, the sounds grew louder. Shuffling feet, inhuman growls, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the barricade. "How long until they break through?" I asked Miller, checking my Glock. 2 magazines. Not nearly enough. "Minutes," replied grimly, racking his shotgun. "Maybe less." We were trapped. The admin building, our supposed sanctuary, had become a tomb. The barricade wouldn't hold for long. Filing cabinets screeched across the floor as the impacts intensified. Cracks appeared in the reinforced door. We exchanged grim looks. Miller, the other 2 officers, Davis and Chen, and me. 4 guns against... how many? "Conserve ammo," Miller ordered, his voice tight. "Aim for the head. Make every shot. Gundinku." Chloe, the IT tech, suddenly spoke up, her voice surprisingly steady. "There might be another way. The old server room." We all looked at her. "What about it?" Miller asked. "It's in the sub-basement," she explained quickly, pointing to a schematic on one of the still-functioning monitors. "Reinforced walls, vault door, separate ventilation. It was decommissioned last year, but the infrastructure's still there, if we can reach it." "How do we get there?" I asked. "Through that?" I nodded towards the groaning door. "No," Chloe shook her head. "There's a maintenance access panel behind the main server racks in this room. Leads directly to the sub-basement utility corridor." It was a long shot, but better than waiting for the inevitable breach. "All right," Miller decided instantly. "Davis, Chen, cover the door. Alex, Chloe, find that panel. Civilians, stay back, stay quiet." While the officers took positions, firing sparingly through gaps in the barricade, Chloe and I frantically pulled away heavy server racks, revealing a bolted metal panel set into the wall. My security keys wouldn't fit this. It was maintenance access. "Wrench!" Chloe yelled, spotting one on a nearby tool cart. I grabbed it, working on the bolts as fast as my shaking hands allowed. Outside, the assault intensified. A heavy thud signaled something large hitting the door. Maybe the infected driver using the wreckage of his truck as a battering ram. "Hurry!" Miller shouted, firing his shotgun. The blast echoed in the confined space. The last bolt gave way. I wrenched the panel open, revealing a dark, narrow shaft descending into blackness. A rusty ladder was bolted to the side. "Chloe, you first," I urged. She didn't hesitate, grabbing her laptop bag and disappearing into the shaft. I turned back to the others. "Let's go, civilians first." One by one, the terrified staff members climbed down. Miller, Davis, and Chen provided covering fire, backing towards the shaft. The main door buckled inward, wood splintering. An arm snaked through, gray and rotting, grasping blindly. "Go, go!" Miller yelled, pushing Davis towards the ladder. He fired his last shotgun shell, then drew his sidearm. Chen was already descending. Miller turned to me. "Your turn, Thorne." "After you, sir." He shoved me towards the opening. "That's an order. Get them safe." I scrambled onto the ladder just as the main door burst open. Infected poured into the security hub, overwhelming Davis before he could fully enter the shaft. Miller emptied his pistol into the closest ones, buying us precious seconds. "Seal it," he roared, turning to face the tide with nothing but empty hands. I pulled the heavy panel closed from the inside as Chloe frantically worked the bolts from below. The last thing I saw was Miller disappearing under a wave of grasping hands and snapping teeth. The sounds were horrific, mercifully muffled as the panel sealed shut. We were safe for now, plunged into the suffocating darkness of the utility corridor, the echoes of sacrifice heavy in the air. Chloe clicked on a small flashlight. Below, lay the sub-basement, another level of potential dangers, but also our only hope. The sub-basement utility corridor was even more claustrophobic than the service tunnels. Pipes dripped, casting eerie reflections in Chloe's weak flashlight beam. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew, layered over the ever-present scent of decay seeping down from above. We were 5, me, Chloe, Davis, the surviving campus cop, and 2 administrators named Frank and Susan. Frank was hyperventilating while Susan just stared blankly ahead, clearly in shock. Davis, despite witnessing Miller's sacrifice, maintained a professional calm, checking his sidearm's remaining ammo. "Server room should be 50 yards down this passage," Chloe whispered, consulting a schematic on her laptop, which miraculously still had some battery life. "Turn left at the main steam pipe junction." We moved slowly, the only sound our footsteps splashing in shallow puddles and Frank's ragged breathing. Davis took point, his pistol held ready. I brought up the rear, clutching Maria's heavy flashlight like a club. "Hold up," Davis signaled, stopping at the junction. He shone his light down the left passage, clear. Then he checked the right. His breath hitched. Lying slumped against a large valve wheel was another body. Maintenance uniform. His face was obscured, but the unnatural angle of his limbs told the story. He hadn't died peacefully. "We go left," Davis said quietly, not wanting to alarm Frank and Susan further. The server room door was exactly where Chloe said it would be. Heavy steel, vault-style locking mechanism. "Old-school combo lock," Chloe murmured, examining it. "Security through obscurity." Luckily, IT kept records. She typed furiously on her laptop, cross-referencing old network diagrams. "Okay, try 3624 to 36. "Seriously?" Davis deadpanned. "Old IT humor," Chloe shrugged. "Worth a shot." It worked. The heavy tumblers clicked and Davis pulled the thick door open. The room beyond was dark, silent, and blessedly empty. Racks of decommissioned servers stood like silent monoliths. Chloe immediately went to a wall panel, flipping breakers. Lights flickered on, low-power emergency lighting, but better than darkness. The ventilation system kicked in with a low hum, circulating air that didn't smell like death. "We're sealed in," Davis confirmed, spinning the vault wheel from the inside. "Separate air, reinforced walls. We might actually be safe here for a bit." Relief washed over the small group. Frank sat heavily on the floor, his breathing finally evening out. Susan blinked, looking around as if waking from a dream. "Okay," Chloe said, plugging her laptop into a dusty network port. "Let's see if we can find out what's happening topside." While she worked, Davis and I did a sweep of the server room. It was larger than it looked, rows upon rows of silent machines. We found a small maintenance closet with some bottled water, expired granola bars, and a comprehensive first aid kit. Luxuries in our current situation. More importantly, we found a secondary access hatch, similar to the one we'd used to enter, leading to another utility corridor. An escape route, if needed. "Anything?" I asked Chloe, returning to the main console area. Her face was grim. "Internal campus network is completely down. Trying external access. Most news sites are offline or just showing emergency alerts. Getting fragments from ham radio operators, military channels." She typed, listened through headphones. "Confirming multiple cities hit. New York, Chicago, LA. It's nationwide, maybe global." The scale of it was hard to comprehend. This wasn't just a local outbreak. "Military response?" Davis asked. "Fragmented," Chloe replied. "Quarantine zones failing, reports of soldiers turning. Seems like standard containment isn't working." She suddenly pointed at her screen. "Wait, I'm picking up something. Encrypted signal, originating from the university's bio-research wing." "That's level 5, Davis said. "Highest containment. What the hell were they working on down there?" "Trying to decrypt," Chloe muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's heavily coded, but the signature, it matches some files I saw when we upgraded their network last year. Project Nightingale." "Nightingale?" I repeated. "Never heard of it." "Top secret," Chloe said. "Above even standard CDC protocols according to the network architecture. Rumor was it involved synthetic biology, creating organisms from scratch." Before she could elaborate, a low scraping sound came from the main vault door. We all froze. Silence. Then another scrape, louder this time, followed by a heavy thud. "They found us," Davis whispered, raising his pistol. The impacts grew more frequent, more violent. Whatever was outside was trying to break through reinforced steel. That door is rated to withstand explosives, Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. How? They're not acting on instinct anymore, I realized, remembering the infected driver using the truck wreck as a tool. They're learning, or something's directing them. The vault door groaned under the assault, metal beginning to buckle near. The hinges. We backed away, moving towards the secondary access hatch. We need to go, Davis urged. Now! Wait, Chloe cried, still at the console. Almost got it. Decryption at 90%. A final massive impact slammed against the door, sending shrapnel flying inward. The locking mechanism shattered. The heavy steel door began to swing open, revealing darkness beyond, filled with shifting shapes and those terrible red eyes. Chloe, leave it, I yelled, grabbing her arm. Got it, she shouted, yanking a USB drive from the port just as the first infected squeezed through the opening. Davis opened fire, dropping the first two, but more pressed in behind them. Go, I'll hold them, he commanded, positioning himself between us and the breach. Frank and Susan scrambled for the secondary hatch. Chloe hesitated, looking back at Davis. Come on, I pulled her towards the ladder. Davis fired his last round, then threw his empty pistol at an oncoming infected before drawing his combat knife. Get that data out, he yelled, meeting the first attacker head-on. We plunged down the ladder into another dark utility corridor, pulling the hatch closed above us just as Davis's screams began, abruptly cut short. We didn't look back, didn't stop, running blindly. Through the suffocating darkness, the weight of the USB drive in Chloe's pocket, feeling like the last hope of a dying world. The sub-basement tunnels were a maze. Chloe's flashlight beam was our only guide, bouncing off dripping pipes and crumbling concrete. Frank, the older administrator, struggled to keep pace, his breathing ragged. Susan remained numb, moving mechanically, her eyes vacant. We were running on fumes, adrenaline wearing thin, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and the gnawing certainty that we were hopelessly lost. Map's useless down here, Chloe panted, stopping at another branching corridor. These tunnels aren't on any official schematic I have. Probably predate the modern campus. We listened. The sounds of pursuit from the server room had faded, but the silence down here felt just as threatening. Which way? Left seemed to slope slightly downward, smelling faintly of chlorine, maybe leading towards the old swimming pool complex. Right went uphill, the air marginally fresher. Up, I decided. Higher ground is usually better ground. The passage twisted and turned, getting narrower. We had to move single file. Suddenly, Frank collapsed, clutching his chest. Can't breathe, he gasped. Heart condition, Susan murmured, the first words she'd spoken since the security hub. Needs his meds. Chloe rummaged in the maintenance first aid kit we'd grabbed. Nothing here for cardiac, just basic stuff. Frank's breathing grew shallower, his face turning blue in the flashlight beam. We tried CPR, but it was no use. Within minutes, he was gone. Another casualty claimed by the chaos, not by the infected. Directly, but by the collapse of the world that kept him alive. We couldn't leave him here. Not like this, but we couldn't carry him either. Susan knelt beside him, closed his eyes gently, and whispered something we couldn't hear. Then she stood up, her expression hardened. We keep moving. The tunnel eventually ended at a rusted spiral staircase leading upward. It emerged into the back of the campus theater's costume shop. Dust motes danced in the beams of light filtering through grimy windows. Racks of clothes stood like silent actors, Shakespearean robes, flapper dresses, animal costumes. It was surreal, stepping from the grim reality of the tunnels into this repository of make-believe. The theater itself seemed deserted. We moved through the backstage area, past ropes and pulleys, emerging onto the main stage. The vast empty auditorium stretched before us, seats shrouded in darkness. What now? Chloe asked, clutching the USB drive. Where do we go? Outside, I said. We need to get off campus, Find a vehicle, head away from the city. The main lobby doors were barricaded from the inside with heavy stage props. Peeking through a gap, I could see the plaza outside was relatively clear, though bodies lay scattered near the fountain. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brutal shades of orange and purple. Day one was almost over. There's a parking garage attached to the Performing Arts Center, Chloe remembered. Faculty parking, maybe find a working car there? It was our best bet. We slipped out a side door, moving quickly across the darkening plaza, sticking to the shadows cast by academic buildings. We saw sporadic movement, lone infected stumbling through distant archways, small groups shuffling across lawns, but managed to avoid direct contact. The parking garage ramp descended into gloom. The air smelled of gasoline and something else in that familiar, sickeningly sweet rot. Emergency lights flickered, casting unreliable pools of light. Empty cars sat parked at odd angles, some with doors open or windows smashed. "Third level," Chloe whispered. "My supervisor usually parks his SUV there. Keys might be—" A low moan echoed from the level below. Then another, closer. They knew we were here. "Move," I urged, pushing Susan forward. We took the stairs, skipping the elevator. The second level was worse. More cars damaged, dark stains on the concrete. We heard shuffling sounds from multiple directions. They were closing in. We reached the third level just as figures appeared at the top of the ramp we'd used. Chloe spotted the SUV immediately, a dark blue Ford Explorer. "There!" We sprinted for it. Susan tripped, falling hard. I helped her up, glancing back. At least a dozen infected were shambling towards us down the ramp. Chloe reached the SUV, relief flooding her face as she found the doors unlocked and the keys in the ignition. A habit her supervisor apparently had. "Get in," she yelled, starting the engine. Susan and I scrambled into the back just as the first infected reached the vehicle, pounding on the windows. Chloe slammed the gear shift into reverse, tires squealing, as she backed out of the space, clipping another car in the process. More infected converged, blocking the downward ramp. "Other way!" I shouted, pointing towards the upward ramp leading to the roof level. Chloe spun the wheel, accelerating up the ramp. We burst onto the roof level just as the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the city into twilight. The view was devastating. Fires burned across Lancaster. Distant sirens had fallen silent. The campus below was a landscape of shadows and sporadic, terrifying movement. But we were out. We were alive. Chloe navigated the SUV down the exit ramp on the far side of the garage, crashing through the flimsy barrier arm onto a side street. "Where to?" she asked, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "West," I said, thinking of the sparse warnings we'd heard. "Away from the cities, away from the coast. Find somewhere defensible, somewhere remote." Susan stared out the window, her face pale in the dashboard lights. "Is anywhere safe anymore?" I didn't have an answer. We drove through the emptying streets of Lancaster's outskirts, the burning city receding in our rearview mirror. We were 3 survivors of the first day, carrying the weight of those we'd lost, and the terrible knowledge contained on a single USB drive. The road ahead was dark, unknown, filled with unimaginable dangers. Day 1 was over, but the long night of this new world was just beginning. We had survived, but survival was just the start. The real fight, the fight to understand, to endure, maybe even to hope, lay ahead in the encroaching darkness.